Welcome back, everybody, to Just Keep Parenting. Thank you for joining here again. This is a place where mistakes are accepted, right? Parenting is hard. And so this is just a place where you can come for 15 minutes to kind of rejuvenate yourself and think, I can do this. I can do hard things, right? So we are talking about easy to love, difficult to discipline, the 7 basic skills for turning conflict into cooperation. We're on chapter 9. We're getting close to the end of the book, but only taking a little bit each week is it's probably got a few months left. But we're going to talk about consequences, and we have mentioned it in previous videos. But this one is specifically called Consequences, Helping Children Learn from Their Mistakes, right? So rather than focusing on punishments and rewards, we want to focus on consequences. And so that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. So the first thing I'd like you to do is think about, how did punishments and rewards work for you as a child, as a teenager, right? Even as an adult, people still try to use them on adults, right? And so how do they make you feel specifically? I think as I took that path, took that question to heart, one of the things that I don't necessarily love to feel is manipulated or guilted, right, into things. And that's kind of what consequences and rewards do, right? I was thinking about some specifically in my life as a elementary school that I can still remember, an elementary school child that I can still remember. And even today, I'm like, that kind of feels like I'm being a little manipulated there, right? And so I think sometimes parents equate, right, punishments and consequences with discipline, right, as they try to control the actions of their children, right? And we've talked about that a little bit before, as far as, we all want children to do what we want them to do. We all know they have agency and they have opinions, right? And so that doesn't negate our ability to teach them, right? But it does help us figure out a little bit more how we can work with them rather than controlling them, right? So sometimes I hear comments like, finish your homework or there's not going to be any screen time, right? And I immediately think, well, wait a minute, what does screen time have to do with homework? In parents' eyes, it may be connected, right? But when I just hear it from an outside viewpoint, I'm like, I don't know about that one, right? If you do this, whatever this is, then we'll go get a treat later, right? So there again, where's the connection to doing your chores or doing your homework or those types of things to getting a treat? One of the other things that I hear often as the child has just hit one of their siblings, sometimes I hear, do you hit your brother? No, go to your room, right? They just hit them. So yes, they do hit their brother, right? And so rather than kind of explaining that through, we ask that question. And sometimes I hear the kids say, yep, just did, right? It's like, oh shoot, as a parent, as the adult, what do I say now, right? And so in previous videos, we have chatted about noticing instead of judging, right? It's pretty easy for us to judge. It's still something that I continue to work on. I'm like, what's going on over there, right? What's that child? When in reality, I'm just like noticing, right? Accepting it as it is right now, because I can't really change what just happened. But what does the moment tell me right now, right? So I can notice it. Oh, this is what's happening, rather than judging it. So when we make comments like the aforementioned ones, we're judging our child's behavior to be good or bad, and then delivering something good or bad to express that judgment, right? So when adults use these for children, they come to depend on the judgment as others as a basis for their own moral decisions, right? Because they can't make those moral decisions. Somebody else is making them for them, right? And so these children grow up focusing on what others demand of them. And then as they get older, what in turn they will demand from others, right? So it's kind of a cycle that we're going through. If this is how we're going to parent, if this is how we're going to caretake our children, then they're not going to have a moral compass, that can develop inside of them, right? So consequences help children think about the effects of their choices, and they draw conclusions, right, about the wisdom of those choices. That sounds really amazing to me, right? But I see it every day in the classroom. When we talk about that, and I say to the children, you know what, when this happened, right, when you did this, then this is what happened, right? And so whether it's a scuffle with a friend, or whether it's something that happened because they were running, or any of those things, right? Um, we're able to talk it through, and it's not like rah, rah, rah. It really is, this is what I saw, right? We just finished up the chapter on reflecting back what the children are emoting, so to speak, right? And so one of the things we want to do as they figure out that wisdom, right, as they come to have that wisdom, right, it builds responsibility, which is the ability to respond to situations appropriately. I just finished parent-teacher conferences, and quite often one of the questions that I get is, so how's my child behave at school, right? Or sometimes they've set in goals saying, I want her to have the skills so she doesn't whine anymore, right? And so one of the things we talk about are those goals that they've written. And quite often I will say, I never saw her whine at school. And the parents are like, what? We're talking about the same child. But this is where it comes down to, right? Is it builds responsibility, which is the ability to respond appropriately to situations. So even though the parents are like, seriously, that's all they do is whine at my house. Well, they feel very safe there, right? And you have taught them, because they're not doing it at school, which is probably the place where they've learned that there's a way to do things at school, and whining probably is not one of them, right? That doesn't mean we don't get whining, but we talk it through. So there are natural consequences, there are imposed consequences, and problem solving, right? Those are the three things that we want to kind of stay with us, right? And so when children experience these types of consequences, they're more likely to develop that inner compass, right? Rather than saying, as finish your homework or there's no screen time, right? So when we over rely on punishments and rewards, it might look a little insane. And I want to read to you what Dr. Bailey said in the book. She said, tomorrow I want you to meet me at Johns Hopkins University. At that time, I want you to perform open heart surgery on me. To help you, I will use punishments and rewards. If you do the surgery but I die, then your car will be repossessed. That's the punishment. If I survive the surgery and recover, you will receive a new car. That's the reward, right? So could the punishment or reward help you perform heart surgery? Getting a new car, giving up your old car? No. Whether you lose your car or win a new car, a new one, it does not help you perform heart surgery, because you, at least most of us, are unequipped to do it, right? Often we demand behavior from children for which they are equally unprepared. We just think they know how to do things. They came in utero knowing how to do things, when in reality, it's all new to them, right? If you use punishment and rewards as a basis for discipline, we fail to teach the children the skills they need to behave well, right? You're holding them accountable for not using behavior skills they have not learned in the first place. As a result, they probably feel inadequate for failing to meet your expectations, right? So at the beginning of the school year, I am always surprised at how long it takes us, right, to talk about the schedules, to talk about the routines. And I have to remind myself, Dory, these kids have only been here 4 days. Or Dory, these kids have only been here 2 weeks, but that's really only 8 days, right? So I'm continually reminding myself as I see behaviors, I'm like, wait a minute, we talked about that, right? Yeah, we talked about that once or twice, but did everybody get it? Was everybody here that day, right? And so those are the things that I continually ask myself as I notice, rather than judging, what is happening, right? So as children receive or perceive, as they perceive a punishment or a reward, or losing a reward, right? Research shows that the brain reacts with increased blood flow to the survival centers, right, and decreased blood flow to the higher thought centers. So right here, decreased blood flow, right? And we go into survival mode. We call it our brainstem, right? So when our brains go into this mode, we become less capable of planning, pattern detecting, receiving information, creativity, classifying data, and problem solving. So we're perceiving that we're losing something or that a punishment is coming, and that sends us into survival mode. And then we can't do those things that you're asking me to do, right? Usually as a teacher or a caregiver or a parent, right? So when this happens, we make decisions that are biologically driven, right? Because I'm here. So my job then is to get them back up to their thinking brain, right? And we can do that as we lovingly guide them, teach them, right? So if we don't lovingly guide them, right, this is what can happen. It can create impulsive children who resist change and lack the ability to solve problems constructively because they're here and not here, right? So as we lovingly guide them, right, and instead of relying on punishments and rewards, we can shift to a reliance on consequences, right? And that helps children to learn from their mistakes. And I truly believe that's why we're all here. We're all having this experience so that we can be better, right? So as parents, as teachers, as caregivers, and as children or teenagers, whoever, right? And so as we think about that and figure out how do I move from punishments and rewards to consequences, it takes a little more time, right, to talk about that. But as I take the time with the children and with my BYU students, right, it's not like they come in and just because they're early childhood educators that they have all the answers, right? And so we have to talk about that sometimes. We have to talk about the words that are coming out of their mouth. We have to talk about the reaction that they had to a child's behavior, right? And we have this conversation with them as well. That we have to figure out that rule of three. And if you remember from previous videos, or if you're new, I'll give it to you again. But the rule of three is we state the expectation, right? So at this center, this is what we're doing, right? Then we come through, and if they're struggling, we restate the expectation again, and then we state the consequence, right? So I'm just thinking of a center that was there during the last week of school, and it was bowling, and so the children were throwing the ball underhand, and a couple of the kids were thinking they were tough and mighty, and they were baseballing it right overhand, and the teacher just said, you know what, guys, that's not going to work over here because we have too much equipment that we're trying to be safe with. So when you're over at this center, you are welcome to underhand it. And she showed them what underhand meant, just in case they didn't know, right? But you can't overhand it because you're not going to have a lot of control when you underhand. So she's telling them why, right? She's giving this, she's explaining. She said, if you're going to continue to overhand it, you're going to have to leave and go find a new center. Immediately, the kids started throwing it underhand, right? She didn't have to use point 3, which was if they continue to throw it overhand, then she said to them, you guys, we've talked about this, so you're going to need to find a new center to visit, right? Many times the parents say to me, does it really work? I'm like, just try it. Yes, it works. Does it work always? 100%? No, right? Sometimes we have to have a little chat. Sometimes they're sad. Sometimes they're angry. And so we talk about that. I know you're angry, buddy. We're reflecting back what we learned last time. I can see your arms are folded and your eyebrows are put together and you are scowling, right? I know you're mad or you're disappointed. Well, we talked about this. We talked about overhand and underhand, and we talked about why, because we've got the computer up here, and so it has to be underhand, but you chose to do overhand. But Miss Nori, I just forgot. You know, I totally get that. I forget too. But right now you need to leave the center, and you can come back to this center anytime, right? It's that I made a mistake, but I want to try again. You bet. But you need to go choose another center first. And when you're done with that center, you can come back to this center, right? So it kind of gives them that number one, we're following through with the consequence. But number two, it gives them time. And they may come back to that center or they may not. They may have a great time in another center. So thinking about how that works for you, right? in your setting, whether it's a school setting, whether it's a home setting, but what can the rule of three do for you? I was talking about it with quite a few parents at parent teacher conference, and that evening I saw the parent again, and she said, Mister, it really works. Because so many times they're just waiting. Sweetie, this is what you need to do. And we say it again. Sweetie, this is what you need to do. Buddy, we talked about this. This is what you need to do, right? Well, they're just waiting for you to pop, right? Because they never know when the consequence is really going to come or the punishment, right? And so we want that consequence to be related, specifically the outcome related to the behavior. It can't always be, right? Which is that implied, right? Consequence, not implied. No, I can't remember what the word was. I'm just out of my brain. This is what happens when you're 58, my friends. Imposed consequence, kind of like implied, but no, it's imposed. And so what we have to do is figure out, okay, so yeah, it works 3 times, right? If we make it 5, 8, 10, then the kid never knows, right? Well, so does she really mean this is the last time? Can I do it again? Right? So we're confusing them as we keep asking and asking and asking, right? If we can do the rule of 3, boom, state the expectation, state the expectation again, give the reminder, right? Some people call it a warning. A warning has kind of negative connotation, so we refer to it as a reminder because we all love reminders. We don't like warnings very much. And then we follow through with the consequence. Okay, we talked about this, buddy, right? So go choose another center. Come back when you're ready to throw it underhand. So that is the rule of 3, and that is why we need to look at consequences rather than punishments and rewards. We're going to talk a little bit more about it next week, so join us again. Pass it along, share it along to anybody who's struggling with this, and we'll see you again. Thanks for joining, my friends.